Marinero, what a day today has been in Montreal Canadiens land. At 3:09 p.m. earlier today, the Montreal Canadiens sent out a press release on their website on Canadiens.com. And that press release announced the firing of Marc Bergevin, general manager of the Montreal Canadiens, Trevor Timmons, assistant general manager of the Montreal Canadiens, and Paul Wilson, who's in charge of their public affairs and their communications. The press release went on to mention that a process to recruit as soon as possible the team's next GM is underway. And while the next general manager will bring significant hockey expertise to the organization, the additional criteria, of course, is that the person's role will be able to communicate with fans in both French and English, something we already knew, but now they've put it down on paper. To ensure the continuity of the day-to-day hockey operations during the process, Mr. Molson has retained the services of Jeff Gorton, who will serve as Executive Vice President, Hockey Operations. Now, this is something very important, and it was much talked about. It was reported on Saturday night that Jeff Molson asked the New York Rangers for permission to speak with Jeff Gorton, their former general manager, who was still under contract with the Rangers. That's why you have to ask permission. Permission was granted. Clearly, the two sides came to an agreement. Now, what is the length of that agreement? It says it retained his services. Will that be just for the rest of the regular season? Will it be the rest of the regular season? And let's see how it goes with the possibility of that being extended. We know that Jeff Molson, over the past several years, was asked about a president of hockey operations and whether or not the Canadiens should have one. And he said that it didn't work and that they weren't going to go there. And now all of a sudden they're going there, which leads a lot of people to believe that the Montreal Canadiens will hire an inexperienced general manager, and Gorton will be there to compensate for that inexperienced general manager because he himself, of course, has plenty of experience. Jeff Gorton was a former assistant GM with the Boston Bruins for 7 seasons. At one point, when Mike O'Connell was relieved of his duties as Boston Bruins general manager, Gorton assumed the responsibilities for about 4 months. In those 4 months, he was part of a draft. He oversaw a draft in which the Boston Bruins drafted Phil Kessel, Brad Marchand, Milan Lucic. He traded Andrew Raycroft and acquired Tuukka Rask. And about a week after that, he signs Zdeno Chara and Mark Savard as unrestricted free agents. Then Peter Chiarelli came in, and Gorton stuck around for a bit, and then he moved on and became a scout with the New York Rangers and replaced Glenn Sather as their general manager. He was general manager of the New York Rangers for a month shy of 6 years. He made some good moves with the New York Rangers as well. He acquired Artemi Panarin. He traded for Mika Zibanejad. He traded for Adam Fox. He was part of that rebuild and signed off on that letter that the New York Rangers sent their fans. So there you have it. We knew Marc Bergevin's job was in trouble. I think pretty much everyone thought that he would not be back. It was no longer a question of if, it was a question of when. And the Canadiens made it official earlier today at 3:09 p.m. that Bergevin was relieved of his duties. Marc Bergevin, who was hired back on May 2nd, 2012, and fired on November 28th, 2021. 9.5 seasons in. In those 9 seasons, no playoffs 3 times. A first-round exit 3 times. An exit in the second round once. An exit in the semifinals once. And an elimination in the Stanley Cup final last year to the hands of the Tampa Bay Lightning. This year, a disastrous season for the Montreal Canadiens, off to their worst 23-game start in their 111-year history. the second worst record winning percentage in the Eastern Conference, the third worst winning percentage in the entire National Hockey League. Marc Bergevin's regular season stats, 315 wins, 251 losses, and his tenure linked with extensions to Carey Price, Jeff Petrie, Brendan Gallagher, Josh Anderson, also acquired Petrie via trade, acquired Anderson via trade, then signed them. The trading of Galchenyuk, the trade of PK Subban to Nashville for Shea Weber, Pacioretty trade to Vegas for Nick Suzuki, Thomas Tatar, and Matthias Norlinder, an offer sheet to Sebastian Aho that was matched by Carolina, and not matching a Carolina offer sheet to Jesperi Kotkaniemi. As for Trevor Timmons, he was with the Montreal Canadiens for 19 and a half years. Hired by Andre Savard back on July 3rd, 2002, as Director of Player Personnel, he was promoted to Assistant General Manager on July 2017. Fired, of course, earlier today, November 28th, 2021. Although he had different titles, at the end of the day, his responsibilities were he was responsible for the amateur draft, basically the director of amateur scouting, which saw Trevor Timmons draft the likes of Carey Price, Ryan McDonough, Max Pacioretty, PK Subban, Brendan Gallagher, and Mikhail Sergachev. Those were his best draft selections. The ones that were a little didn't work out when maybe they should have, drafting Galchenyuk third overall, drafting Kotkaniemi third overall, when the choice would have been Morgan Riley in Galchenyuk's year and Brady Tkachuk in Kotkaniemi's year. Some first-round picks that did not pan out: Sherbak, Juleson, McCarron, Tenorti, Fisher, LeBlanc. It seems like when the Canadiens drafted the best player available, they got it right many times. When they drafted by position, need, or in Louis LeBlanc's case, language, it didn't work out. And that was the problem. That was the problem. All right. This is brought to you by, the Sick Podcast is brought to you by Cherry River Hard Seltzer. Only 90 calories, natural flavors, no preservatives, now available in Quebec grocery stores and the beer store. I want to let you know that I will get to your phone calls. I'll get to your text messages, not your phone calls. No, I'll get to your text messages. And so if you text, it'll pop up on the screen. I'll read the text. And at that point, I will try and answer them as best I can. So now, since then, many names are coming up as who is going to be the next general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. I'll let you know that Jeff Molson will be meeting with members of the media tomorrow at 11 a.m. at Centre Complexe Sportif Bell in Brossard, where I'm sure it's a press conference that's going to go on for anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes. Jeff Gorton will not be on hand at that press conference. The word is that he's currently at his son's hockey tournament in Vancouver. But I'm sure Jeff is going to be asked a lot of questions. Says Joey Aliberti, who is the right pick for the next GM of the Montreal Canadiens? Joey, that's a tough question because there are so many people that it can be, but the Canadiens, once again, are limiting themselves by having to choose a candidate that is able to communicate in French. That would make the list a shorter list than usual, and it would narrow down to Mathieu Dash, who's currently with the Tampa Bay Lightning as Director of Player Personnel there under the guidance of Julien Brisebois. Martin Madden Jr., who's the Assistant General Manager of the Anaheim Ducks. Roberto Luongo, who's the assistant in Florida. Patrick Roy, who's the General Manager and Coach of Les Remparts du Québec. Dale Talon, longtime executive, of course, we know that. Pierre Maguire, who's with the Ottawa Senators. Former Montreal Canadiens, Stéphane Quintal, Vincent Danfus, and Daniel Brière. And those, I would say, are the names most likely to come up. There could be one or two that could be added to the mix, But for now, those are the names. We'll see what happens. My gut feel tells me Mathieu Dash is in pole position. And if I had to guess today, right now, I would guess Mathieu Dash. He's learned under Julien Brisebois, a team that has won 2 Stanley Cups over the last couple of seasons. He's a former Montreal Canadian. He has a great relationship with Jeff Molson. He would be my guess. But we can't discount Martin Madden Jr., whose CV is unbelievable. He was an amateur scout with the New York Rangers for, I believe, 7 seasons, 6 or 7 seasons. He then went on to be an amateur scout with the Carolina Hurricanes. He won a cup with the Hurricanes in 2006 as their amateur scout. In his first 12 seasons with the Anaheim Ducks, he was the director of amateur scouting. In his last 2 seasons with the Anaheim Ducks, he has been the assistant general manager. During his time with Anaheim, they have drafted Josh Manson, William Karlsson, goalie John Gibson, defenseman Sami Vatanen, winger Kyle Palmieri, defenseman Cam Fowler, forward Ricard Raquel, Hampus Lindholm, Shea Theodore, Sam Steele, Maxime Comtois, Troy Terry, the leading point getter with Anaheim, young sensation Trevor Zegras, and stud in the making defenseman Jamie Drysdale. That's an impressive list. SportBuffShop.com for all of your officially licensed sports apparel and more. And our Sick merchandise. Use code SICK15 for 15% off on all of their items. You check it out. We'll get to more of your questions, Habs questions, and I'll comment on them. Let's go. ABC 260, opinion on Dominic Ducharme's future with the team. My opinion, Dominic Ducharme will see out the rest of the regular season. I believe the pressure will be taken off because he will be told that his job is not in jeopardy this season. The Canadians will play the season out. And if I were a betting man, I would bet that Dominic Ducharme will be the head coach to start next season. How much longer he'll last after that, that'll depend on him and the results and the way they play. Other text messages coming in, the Sick Podcast, Anthony Angel. With this change, Price, Edmondson, Hoffman, Byron coming back, do you think we have a chance to make the playoffs? Do they have a chance? Yes, they have a chance. Will they make the playoffs? I don't think so. To finish with 98 points in the remaining 59 games, I believe the Canadians have to win in the remaining 59 games. I think they have to have a record of, 40 plus wins? More than that? No, I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening at all. I really don't. Gianni Potesta, do you think Gorton will be the real person making decisions behind the scenes while having a French-speaking general manager as a front? Well, hard to imagine that they're going to hire a general manager that's going to have more experience than Jeff Gorton. The challenge is, what I don't know here is, how long will they retain his services? If they retain his services for at least a couple of years so that whoever they hire is insulated by him, then the answer to that will be yes, he will be more influential than the general manager will be. Will kind of be like when a young Alain Vigneault coached the Montreal Canadiens and had to rely on Dave King's experience. For the first couple of years, King was the coach, but didn't have the title. Vigneault had the title. If Gorton is retained for several seasons, it'll be a similar type situation. If he's not, that'll be interesting. More texts, the Sick Podcast. Do you think Carey Price will play for the Habs again? Great question. Great question. Let's just say Carey Price, who has a no movement clause, and he's got 5 years left on the contract this year and 4 other years after that, at $10.5 million per season, wants to move to another team. He's going to have to come back and show that he can still do it with the Montreal Canadiens. And if he wants to represent Hockey Canada at the Olympics, he's going to have to come back and play for the Montreal Canadiens. I believe Carey Price will play for the Montreal Canadiens again. I know that contract will be very, very difficult to move, but my gut tells me that Carey Price will not be a Montreal Canadian for the rest of that contract. Whether he's moved on to another organization or he stops playing before that contract is up, I don't know, but I don't believe that Carey Price will be with the Canadiens for the remainder of his contract. You can let Carey and anyone close to him tell you whatever they want. Carey Price wanted to be picked up by the Seattle Kraken. Anyone remotely close to that situation knows that. You don't risk getting picked up to go somewhere you don't want to go, even if there's only a 1% chance of that happening. Where I believe the Canadiens made a mistake is when Seattle chose not to pick him up. If I was the Montreal Canadiens, I would have told Seattle, are you interested in Carey Price? If they would have said, we are, but his salary scares us off, I would have said, we'll make a deal in the next coming days and we'll retain half his salary. That's what I would have done. They didn't, but I still don't think that Carey Price will be with the Canadiens for the remainder of his contract. Tony, besides this year, do you consider Bergevin to have been successful or not with the Canadiens, and do you see him back in the NHL anytime soon? I'll tackle that question first. Yes, I do. I believe that Marc Bergevin will be working somewhere. If Martin Madden Jr. is not going to be the guy in Anaheim, I believe it will be Bergevin. But I think that Marc Bergevin, his best chance is probably Los Angeles with the Kings. I do believe that Marc Bergevin will be a general manager before next season starts. Yes. Was he successful? 3 years of no playoffs. Like I mentioned, 3 years eliminated in the first round, 1 year eliminated in the second round, 1 year eliminated in the semis, 1 year eliminated in the finals. 315 regular season wins, 251 losses. Based on that, I would say he gets a passing grade. But a lot of people are probably going to disagree with that. But I would say that he gets a passing grade. Let's not forget that the team that Marc Bergevin inherited was the third worst team in the National Hockey League. But 9.5 years later, they're once again the third worst team in the National Hockey League. So I think it was average to good. He did have an amazing year. The year the Canadiens went to the Stanley Cup final last year. Everything he touched turned into gold. It was the best work that he ever did as general manager with the Montreal Canadiens. Every player that he brought in provided depth, provided leadership, played a role, and were contributed to getting the Canadiens to the Cup final. Unfortunately, it wasn't sustainable. That team had 1 year in them, and then a few things happened that he couldn't control. Carey Price entering the Players Assistance Program, Joel Edmondson getting hurt, Paul Byron getting hurt. The decision to let Phil Deneau go and sign with Los Angeles, that one hurt because Philip Deneau, I believe, was a glue in the Montreal Canadiens lineup. He kind of like just kept everything together. Trevor Timmons also let go. A lot of people are looking at people that had a connection with Jeff Gorton to probably take over. Maybe that, or maybe the next general manager will have a connection with whichever organization they come from. But at the same time, that's not easy to fulfill the job of a director of amateur scouting, because most teams usually retain the services of whoever they have working for them. Should be noted that Trevor Timmons' contract was up at the end of the season, so he was easy to replace in that respect. More questions that we can get to. I think Montreal should go with Martin Brodeur, Mathieu Dash, Roberto Luongo. I don't think Martin Brodeur wants it. I'm not so sure how much Roberto Luongo wants it, but I just have a feeling that the Canadiens would go with a Mathieu Dash over a Roberto Luongo. Close to Jeff Molson, used to play for the Montreal Canadiens. I think it's got some importance to the Canadiens. Other questions coming in. The Sick Podcast. Steve Ott. I wonder if that's the former hockey player. I really hope Gorton is here for more than just to help Molson get someone in place. That would leave us in the same position with Molson in charge of hockey operations. What do you think the chances of this being the case is, Tony? I'm not crazy about the terms retained the services. That sounds like a temporary solution. That sounds like just the rest of the season. I think Jeff Gorton is a fantastic hire. I would think he would be a great hire if he was the next GM of the Canadiens. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the case. He doesn't speak French. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a French last name. Unfortunately, he's not from the province of Quebec, because, you could easily tell Jeff Gorton, Jeff, will you be willing to take French courses? And I'm sure Jeff would have said, yes, of course, because after all, who doesn't want to be the general manager of what used to be the once most prestigious organization in all of hockey? But the fact that he's not from Quebec, the fact that he's not a francophone, the fact that he doesn't have a French last name, he's out of luck, which is too bad. Someone sent me something earlier today. Do you have anything against the Canadiens hiring a francophone general manager? No, not at all. If they would have hired Julien Brisebois, who's won the Stanley Cup in the last 2 years as the general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning, no, I wouldn't have a problem with it whatsoever. But unfortunately, Julien Brisebois extended his contract for another 5 years with the Tampa Bay Lightning, so he's not coming here. You limit yourself. That's all I'm saying. You limit yourself. In the last 17 years, how many French-speaking general managers have won the Stanley Cup? I'm not so sure how much French Ray Shiro speaks, but I think the answer might be Julien Brisebois and only Julien Brisebois. You are limiting yourself. So in the last 17 years, I think there was a lockout. I think there was one lockout. So what? 15, 16 Stanley Cups have gone out. One French-speaking general manager who won 2 of them. The rest were not. You're not putting the odds on your side. John says, if a rebuild is the plan, which big contracts do you trade and which veterans stay to help the rookies? I know what I'm doing. Right off the bat, I'm trading Carey Price, I'm trading Jeff Petrie, and I'm trading Brendan Gallagher. With all due respect to all 3 of them, that's what I'm doing. And I really, really love Brendan Gallagher. Who doesn't? We love everything about him. But business is business. And 6 years at $6.5 million, that's too steep for me. Other questions coming in on the Sick Podcast. I'm Marinero. Joey says, do you take a leap of faith with Stan Bowman just on pedigree alone, knowing what we know? No, that's not going to happen. The Montreal Canadiens lived a PR nightmare this offseason when they drafted Logan Mailloux after everything that happened. And that was a PR nightmare, and it still is. I wouldn't be surprised if the Canadiens end up trading Logan Mailloux one day. even before he plays a game with the Montreal Canadiens. Are they going to hire Stan Bowman right after that? With Bowman being aware of Kyle Beach being a victim of sexual abuse to the hands of the video coach and not doing much about it? No, the Canadiens are not going to hire Stan Bowman. It's not going to happen. Dale Talon is the most experienced out of any candidate you can have out there who speaks French. 71 years old, a ton of experience. He was the architect that built those Chicago teams that won those Stanley Cups. But I just have a feeling the Canadiens are going younger. And once again, if I were a betting man today, I would guess Mathieu Dash. If I had to take, if there's a dark horse pick, a real dark horse pick, it would be Vincent D'Anfus. Wouldn't surprise me if the Canadiens hired him, but as a real dark horse here, okay? Not the favorite. But if I were a betting man, I would bet that it's going to be Mathieu Dash. But once again, the resume of Martin Madden Jr. is really impressive. Anthony Lanny, who would be your choice of GM? Now choose one from this list. Madden, McGuire, Roy, or Talon. Pierre McGuire, I know you're asking me my choice. Would be a dream for Pierre, and I would love it if it could happen for him. Patrick Roy, no. I don't see him working well within a team, and I think he would want to be the GM, the coach, the assistant coach, the goalie coach, the video coach, the defense coach, the goalie, the player, the owner, the president, the vice president, the hockey ops. I think he'd want to do it all. I don't see that. Dale Talon, I think, is just a little bit older, and it's time for a revamp. And if I had to choose with that list, I would think that the one that has the most experience right now, current, been in the game, touched on different positions as amateur scout, director of amateur scouting, assistant general manager, would probably be Martin Madden Jr. Other questions coming in. Which player has the most trade value outside your opinion of the ones that are considered core players? All right. So Carey Price is a core player, I guess, so we'll discount him. Jeff Petry's a core player, so we'll discount him. Nick Suzuki's a core player, so we'll discount him. Cole Caufield is not yet a core player, and I would say that he holds a lot of value. I would say there are teams that look at Cole Caufield and believe that this guy could be a 30-goal scorer for many, 30-plus goal scorer for many years in the National Hockey League. So my guess would be Caufield. More questions on the Sick Podcast. We'll get to them. Brought to you by Cherry River Hard Seltzer, of course. Kevin Aravallo. The bilingual thing should not be a requirement. That's why they can't hire the best option available. Well, it is what it is, and it is a requirement. We knew that it would be even before they put pen to paper and actually put it in their press release. It's not complicated. The last time they had an interim Anglophone coach, Randy Cunneyworth, there were a sector of people that were upset. They manifested themselves in front of the Molson Center. They threatened to boycott Molson and stop buying their beer. And the Canadiens' next coach after that was French-speaking. And so Jeff Molson at the time thought that based on what he was hearing, based on the boycotting and the picketing or the threats to boycott, that it was going to affect his other business, which was beer and beer sales, and he didn't want to do it. And gave in, and he's continued to go with French-speaking general managers and coaches. At the end of the day, I say it's about the best. And if the best is French-speaking, I'm all for it. And if the best is from the province of Quebec, fantastic. But if the best is not, I think it's really unfortunate the Montreal Canadiens won't have the best GM in hockey. And the one thing we can't say, with all due respect to Dominic Ducharme, is they don't have the best coach in hockey. Right now, they don't have a top 5 coach in hockey. Right now, they don't have a top 10 coach in hockey. And right now, they don't have a top 15 coach in hockey. I'll stop there because I want to be respectful. And right now, the coach that they have is failing the test. Tony Polito, realistically speaking, does Caufield have his place in the National Hockey League? Did they rush him? I think he should develop in the American Hockey League for the rest of the season. Tony, I agree with you 100%. This is a losing environment. I believe you have to dominate at every level before you get the call-up. Patience is a virtue. Cole Caufield has 1 goal in the last 20 games, going back to last year with the Montreal Canadiens. We know that Cole Caufield is a guy who scored goals everywhere he's gone. He's good for, a goal a game, sometimes more than a goal a game at different levels. He had 2 goals and 3 assists, 5 points in 6 games when he was recalled from the Laval Rocket. I would send them back down to Laval, an environment that's better. I would give him 20 plus minutes of ice time there. I would try and make him a better defensive hockey player while maintaining great offensive numbers, putting him on a number 1 line, putting him on special teams, putting him on the power play, seeing him light the lamp. And next year we go from there. If he's dominant to a point where he can be a significant NHL contributor, then he starts with the Canadiens next season. If not, you take the time you need in Laval. We have to look long-term here and not short-term. Long-term. And if Cole Caufield's going to end up being a 35-plus goal scorer and having a very long career because he would have stayed 3 seasons in Laval, then so be it. That's it for me on this special Habs edition of the Sick Podcast. You can follow us on our Facebook page, The Sick Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at The Sick Podcasts. And follow our YouTube channel, The Sick Podcast. Subscribe. It's free. Why? Because I'm Marinaro, and this podcast never sleeps. As a matter of fact, this podcast is sick in a good way.